Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on Friday, June the 17th, 2016 here in Midtown Manhattan, the Daily Racing Form Studios. Lovely day here in the big city, New York City. Hopefully wherever you are, it's a little bit nicer or on par with this anyway. Well, I got the U.S. Open on over here finally. It seems like they've got a break in the disastrous weather they've had over the past 24 hours or so. So we've got a lot of things going on here, but most importantly, the thing we're going to start off at the top anyway with is the Triple Crown. It's done. It's finally over. I don't know about you guys, everyone playing at home. Feels like it's been about a year and a half. It's only been 5 weeks, but long 5 weeks and a lot of things that you cram into a short amount of time. So I think it's kind of appropriate that we do a sort of recap, that we go back. We've gone through each of those three races in depth, ad nauseum, 100 different times, 100 different ways. But let's kind of go back and see what worked, what didn't work, and for who, all throughout the entire way. Now, again, if you're watching here live on DRF Live, thanks for doing so. If you're listening to it in the podcast or watching it in the podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, ESPN.com, however you're finding it, thanks for giving us a little bit of time. Let's rewind. And again, we're going to go all the way to the very beginning. We're going to go back to the Kentucky Derby. Going into it, there were a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions. And this is going to be kind of the theme of the day, kind of comparing how trips worked out, how horses ran, and all sorts of different circumstances, not only for the Triple Crown. We'll get into it a little bit later on with Tepin, which was a whole different discussion. I had no idea it was going to go down the road that it went down a few days ago when she was victorious at Royal Ascot. Let's start with the Derby, though, where Nyquist came in. He was unbeaten. He hadn't really been tested all that much. He was really kind of an unblemished sort of champion going into the Derby. He looked good on paper. There was a question about the distance, for me anyway. I know some people were more bullish on him than I. Let's see how things shook down. Larry Coleman's at the top of the lane, the Derby.
2, and they're into the stretch, and it's Nyquist. Nyquist has taken the lead on the outside. Gunrunner, second at the rail. 5 lengths back to Destin in third. And they come to the final furlong. Exaggerator is closing in. Nyquist to catch with a 16th to go. Gunrunner, Exaggerator on the outside. Nyquist and Exaggerator, they're coming to the line together. And Nyquist is still unbeaten. He has won the Kentucky.
Still unbeaten, got the job done in that spot. And the way I teased it the other day on Twitter and in the promo was we would go over the best and the worst. Best and worst is kind of harsh. Maybe we wanted to soften it a little bit. I'm going to call it the good and the not so good. We're going to go through each one of those sort of scenarios, each one of those kind of subplots for each one of these three races. Let's start off with the good here in the Kentucky Derby. Obviously, Nyquist. Nyquist pressed a fast pace throughout. You heard Larry Coleman allude to the fact that he's still unbeaten, still hadn't gotten sort of taken down. Exaggerator kept running into him, unfortunately for him. We'll find out. He eventually would end up getting his revenge. But look, Nyquist, really a deserving champion of the Kentucky Derby. He was certainly one of the major positives, one of the major good things to pull from the first Saturday in May. Again, it was one of those efforts. You can go back and compare it over the past few years, whether we want to talk about American Pharoah or we want to talk about California Chrome. They all worked out a similar sort of trip as far as position is concerned. None of the other two, or either of the other two, I should say, had to work nearly as hard as Nyquist did early on, being so close to that hot pace and still being able to take over, have plenty left in the tank, and get the job done, ultimately moving on and adding that to his already very, very stout resume. Another good, I would have to say, was Gunrunner. Gunrunner was the third place runner that day, and he was no match for Nyquist or Exaggerator, but hear me out. Again, this is going to be kind of, we're going to be going through a couple different things and trying to draw some parallels, kind of some conclusions, if you will. Gunrunner, although he got soundly defeated, I had to look at this as a good thing and a good effort from him, simply because he stood up for all the people, myself included, that wanted to bash the form of the Louisiana 3-year-olds leading up to the Derby, where, you know what, we said, it's a bad group, weak crop, we don't know anything about them, none of them are any good, Gunrunner's very goofy. Guess what, he acquitted himself very nicely, and I think really that was kind of flying the Louisiana flag, saying, we're not that bad. Everyone was giving us a hard time, or most people anyway were. Again, myself included. He acquitted himself very well. He ran a good third. And we'll talk about Gunrunner here again later on in the show when we go over some races this upcoming weekend. He'll be making his return to the racetrack for the first time since the Kentucky Derby in the Grade 3 Matt win at Churchill Downs tomorrow night. So I thought Gunrunner was a positive. Another good that we can pull from the Kentucky Derby was traffic. Normally that's a race notorious for trips and trouble and all sorts of issues. This year, remarkably, seemed to be pretty clean. Everyone seemed to get through it more or less unscathed. There were no real disasters, maybe save one horse who we'll talk about here in a minute and the not so good. But all things considered, I don't think anyone really had an excuse. At the end of the day, if you ran your race and you weren't good enough, you weren't good enough. There were really no sort of issues as far as getting stuck in behind horses and jacked up and not being able to get through and give a good account of yourself. Let's go to the flip side, the not so good. One of Todd Pletcher's horses is called Outwork. Very lightly raced, had a ton of upside. Another son of Uncle Mo, who again sired the Kentucky Derby winner Nyquist. He went into this spot and he was a very interesting runner because he came out of the Wood Memorial, which by anyone's estimation was one of the sort of historically weak efforts, considering the slow time and the wet track and all things that really went against them. Outwork is a horse, though, that went into the Derby with a lot of hype, and a lot of people thought that maybe he could be Pletcher's entrant, more so than Destin, that could end up being the one to carry the mantle and carry the torch and go on. He was pretty terrible in this spot, and it's unfortunate because this is still a horse that I think has got a lot of ability, and hopefully we'll see him come back in the Dwyer here a few weeks at Belmont Park as part of their Stars and Stripes Festival. He's a nice horse. I think he's got a lot of ability, but boy, that first Saturday in May, maybe that was truly the scenario where it was too much too soon for a lightly raced horse, and maybe the big atmosphere or whatever you want to call it, the 168,000 people that were at Churchill Downs, maybe that all kind of got to him a little bit and he just didn't fire his shot. He was disappointing. He was part of the not so good. I would put him at the top of the not so good, but we'll see. Again, he's going to hopefully be back here in the Dwyer in a few weeks. Another part of the not so good, Mother Nature. Mother Nature was a key sort of component, a key figure in these three races going out through the entire Triple Crown campaign, but particularly in the Derby, because there was threat of thunderstorms throughout the majority of the day, and it seemed like we were going to get through, just missed them coming through Louisville, and they were supposed to be very severe and all sorts of nonsense, and just when it looked like we were good to go, it comes rolling through just before the Woodford Reserve. You've got horses almost getting decapitated by flying debris, and Grand Tito, thankfully he was okay. But there was a lot of rain that fell in a short amount of time. Now, as far as the race itself was concerned, the sun came back out, they had great conditions, but you could see there was still some standing water on the racetrack as far as the main track is concerned. When I had Ernie Munich on a few weeks back, he made mention that he thought that track was wetter than I think anyone else would sort of, I don't want to say anyone else, but wetter than the page would indicate, where it was listed as a fast track. Didn't look like there was any sort of a downgrade. There was definitely some moisture in that racetrack, and if you want to say that moved up a horse like Exaggerator, I won't argue with you, but at the same time, it was just one of those things that just the timing was terrible, and Mother Nature, she was a key component of these three races, and we'll dive into those as we go on as well. And the final not so good for the Derby, as I made mention, there wasn't a ton of traffic, and that was a good thing. The one horse that somehow found some traffic seemed to be Creator. He's one of those sort of one-run closers. His name is going to figure prominently here later on. He just got unfortunate. It was a bad situation where he ended up in behind horses when he was just making his run, and at the top of the lane, right around the quarter pole, it seemed like he had to steady and really lost all hope. So it was a situation disappointing for the connections, disappointing for Steve Asmussen and Ricardo Santana, but at the same time, it's good that the horse came out of it okay, and we got to see him last weekend in the Belmont Stakes, which we'll touch on here momentarily. So that was the Derby. Let's button that up. That's done. Nyquist is the only one that has the opportunity to try to win the Triple Crown going into the Preakness in Baltimore 2 weeks later. Let's see how things shook down from the top of the lane.
But Exaggerator sweeps up on the outside, and so Exaggerator looking to turn the tables on Nyquist, who's down to the rail. In the final furlong of the Preakness, Stradivarius moved to the third. Nyquist laboring, there is Exaggerator, and Kent Desormer at the 16th pole from Nyquist. Exaggerator in the Preakness turns the tables on Nyquist, who's trying to hang on to second.
Dave Rodman with the call. The Preakness. Exaggerator did turn the tables. He finally got the measure of Nyquist after so many times trying to run him down and just couldn't do it. He finally was able to turn the tables down in Baltimore. And I suppose the interesting thing is, do you want to call it the wet track? Is that the reason that he got moved up, or was it just the perfect storm, no pun intended, where he got the pace scenario that he needed and he got a beautiful ride from Kent D? Let's talk about it. As far as the goods are concerned, very clearly, Exaggerator. This was just continuing his strong form. He would run triple digit after triple digit buyer. He got a 103 in that effort. He just did everything the way you want to see a good classic sort of horse do. Then it was interesting too, because down the backside, he moved into contention a little bit earlier than I think most people thought he was going to. And that was really a product of the horse himself. It wasn't Kent DeSormo getting him involved early on. It was just a matter of the horse wanted to go. He was sitting on a rocket ship, and he ended up getting a great ride from Kent D, eased him out, and all things worked out. So a very, very good effort from Exaggerator, winning the middle jewel of racing's Triple Crown here in North America. He clearly enjoys a wet track. That's now no surprise to anyone. Kent D was part of the good. Kent DeSormo, you got to look at it again. He did everything right. He thought that this horse was going to be in a good position down on the inside. He knew the pace was hot, took him back, moved into it a little bit, eased into it, and then ended up making his big move on the far turn. And also another good, you've got to look at Keith DeSormo, where finally he was a Breeders' Cup winner. He won with Texas Red a handful of years ago in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he's finally getting the sort of recognition that he deserves, shown that he's a good quality horseman, knows what he's doing. And look, even that goes back to last year where he had Swipe as a good 2-year-old. This is a guy who knows what he's doing. He's a quality horseman. As he starts getting better stock, there's no reason to think that he's not going to continue on. And maybe he's going to end up going on a bit of a run here over the next 10, 15 years, training Triple Crown sort of winners and big race winners overall. So both the DeSormo brothers, they both get goods as far as good compared to not so good. More goods. Cherry Wine and Lonnie. Cherry Wine goes out for Dale Romans. He got a second place finish here in this race, and it was a great thing. Great ride from Corey Lannery. Very, very gutsy. That's what Lannery does. He rides the woods, stays down on the inside, just squeezed through on the far turn and came through. Again, that was probably just the perfect sort of storm for him, where he got plenty of pace to run it. He got a wet track, which we all know he loves. I don't know that if he couldn't get the job done there against top caliber competition, I don't know that he's going to be able to. We'll see if he continues to develop as a 3-year-old, but a good showing from Cherry Wine. He's classic placed. And Lonnie, look, he got a great setup as well. He'd already been proven on a wet track. At the end of the day, he couldn't quite get up in time for third, but look, very good effort, and it seemed like he was just slowly taking steps forward from all of his antics down at Churchill. Seemed like he got to Baltimore, things were going a little bit better, and he was just building, maturing as a 3-year-old does at this time of year. And maybe that was going to foreshadow something good to come in the Belmont Stakes. Again, we'll get to that in a little bit. And I also thought a good was Stradivari. All things considered, I know this horse, he ended up 4th. Considering it was his first time against graded stakes competition and his first time on a very sloppy track, taking that kick back, he seemed to resent it early on. John Velasquez got him to relax nice and kindly down the backside. Thought it was a good effort, and I think really this kind of showed that he belongs. He proved that he is a top caliber 3-year-old, and it'll be interesting to see as we go on. Look, he showed up in the Belmont. We'll talk about that in a minute, but down the road, I think this horse, again, if it wasn't too much too soon for him as well, he can end up being a major player as far as the 3-year-olds are concerned as well. Let's go to the not so good. Nyquist, I don't want to say he himself, he didn't run a good race. He ran a tremendous race. But the not so good was being involved in that hot pace early on and ultimately paying the price and only losing the way that he did by the margin that he did, finishing third. This is a tremendous effort. I would almost argue as good, if not better than his effort in the Kentucky Derby, especially since he was dealing with a truly wet track for the first time in his life. I thought it was a very, very good effort, but not so good that he was so close. He had to run such a hard race, and then he came out of it with that elevated white blood cell count and unfortunately got sick, forced him to miss the Belmont. We'll talk about him, though, momentarily in some DRF Plus headlines, because pretty big headline as far as Nyquist is concerned happened earlier this morning at Santa Anita. So Nyquist, unfortunately, part of the not so good. Mother Nature, what are you doing? Stop ruining all these big race days with the rain. Just rain all week if you want. Just don't rain on Saturday. Give us a nice fast track, firm turf to run on. Unfortunately, she showed up all day on Saturday. It was a disaster, total washout. That turf course down there had to have some serious bog because the amount of rain that fell throughout the course of the day was significant. So Mother Nature, you're 2 for 2 on the not so good. Get your act together. Uncle Lino, and this is the final not so good of the Preakness anyway. Not so good because I thought he ran a very good race. I think he's a very talented horse. Unfortunately, he was there really dueling on the lead. Really kind of gave Nyquist everything he could handle, and unfortunately, he got hurt coming out of the race. I don't know what the long-term prognosis is for him, but he's a talented runner. I think he'd ultimately do better going shorter. I don't know that he's going to come back this year. I hope he does, and if it's not this year, hopefully he comes back as a 4-year-old, because this is a very talented horse, and it'll be interesting to see. Again, not so good that he got hurt. He ran a fine race. He ended up folding like he was supposed to. I mean, all things considered, you're not supposed to go that fast against a horse the caliber of Nyquist and still hang on. Hopefully he comes back healthy at some point, whether it is later on as a 3-year-old or down the road as a 4-year-old. Let's move on to the third and final leg of racing's Triple Crown here in North America. The Belmont Stakes happened last Saturday afternoon. Exaggerator was showing up. We had no Nyquist. He was the heavy favorite. He was the horse that you were going to have to beat. Let's see how things shook down as they turn for home in the Belmont.
And they're into the stretch, and Destin has taken the lead in the Belmont Stakes. Stradivari is there. Governor Malibu couldn't get through on the inside. He is in traffic. Exaggerator. Here comes Lonnie on the far outside, and Creator is coming too. It is Destin in front. Creator, Lonnie on the outside. Destin and Creator. These two come down to the line together. Too close to goal.
Tremendous finish in the Belmont Stakes. Great call from Larry Coleman down the lane. The good. Let's start off with Creator and Irad Ortiz. Creator was the horse we made mention of. He was probably the only one in the Derby that you could truly say had some trouble. He got jacked up at the top of the lane, wasn't able to come with his run. He gets Irad Ortiz, and it's nothing that Ricardo Santana did, but I can understand why the Connections wanted a local horse, or a local jockey, I should say, to ride in a race like this, because Belmont, again, it's just such an odd configuration, simply because it's so big. You want someone that rides there day in and day out. Irad Ortiz fits the bill. Creator ran every step of the way. He was super game down the lane. He did not want to lose, and it also didn't hurt that Irad Ortiz made every move perfect, and it all worked out for him. Certain horses started to fold at certain times. He was able to get through while other horses couldn't. Irad Ortiz, you can make the case this is the best ride of his career. Obviously the biggest victory of his career, winning a Grade 1 in the Belmont Stakes. He'd won all the Grade 1s in the past, but the Belmont has got to be the biggest one of his career. You can see how excited he was afterward. Boy, I thought that tandem right there, Ortiz, Creator, Asmussen, Windstar, everything worked out. They're certainly on the good side. Destin, he got a very good in this race as well, as far as I'm concerned. Proved that he belongs among the top 3-year-olds in this sort of crop in the division. I thought it was a very good effort, and considering this is only his second start in 13 weeks, thought he acquitted himself very well. Hopped back to his left lead late. I can forgive him for that at a mile and a half. He's never going to go this far again. I think he'll be a horse down the road, Saratoga time, we'll hear from as far as Todd Pletcher is concerned. Lonnie, classic place. What else can you say? This is a horse that just bit by bit got better and better and better as each one of these weeks went on, as each one of these races went on. He got more mature, and it seemed like he got more acclimated to American racing, even though his training style was unorthodox as far as we're concerned. Certainly it worked out. Fitness wasn't an issue. Carried a lot of ground. He had a bit of a tough trip, but at the end of the day, he ran very well. He runs third. He's classic place. He'll go back to Japan, and I think, in a way, Japan, this is a good for Japan as well. And a good, really, we're the ones here in the States that are going to benefit, because I think this is kind of the eye-opener for the Japanese contingent that, look, Lonnie may not have been one of their better horses in the grand scheme of things as far as 3-year-olds are concerned over the past handful of years. It was one of their better ones this year, but you heard whispers that the Japanese contingent were convinced that, okay, we know what it takes now to get a good horse, a good sort of American-style horse, has a little bit of early speed, isn't such a head case like Lonnie is. Let us bring over one of our good horses and we'll see what happens. If they do that, we could end up having a Japanese winner of a Kentucky Derby or some sort of a classic race in the Triple Crown. So I think all things considered, Lonnie, a good showing for Japan, and the Japanese contingent themselves overall, they've got to be pretty pleased. And it's exciting to think that they could end up sending some more horses over this way as well in years to come. Mother Nature, thank you, finally, for cooperating a little bit. A little bit. Now look, you spit a little at the end of the race, and you ended up having it be perfect where Irad Ortiz and everyone they're down there, the award ceremony, the celebration, a little bit of a rainbow comes out. NBC, I'm sure, was over the moon. You couldn't have asked for anything more than that. Mother Nature, thankfully, finally cooperated with us a little bit. The 3-year-olds as a whole, they're probably not superstars at this stage in the game anyway. They could develop into something down the road. We don't know just yet. At this stage, it's fair to say that they're not as good as last year's 3-year-olds or the year prior. But at the end of the day, they're very entertaining. We've had 3 different winners in 3 different classic races, the Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont. It'll be interesting to see. Hopefully all 3 of them, we'll see them kind of tangle again up at Saratoga, whether it's the Jim Dandy, whether it's the Travers, maybe down at Monmouth Park. In the Haskell, it'll be very interesting to see, because there's another 3-year-old who we'll talk about again in DRF Plus headlines who will be running at Monmouth, possibly prepping for the Haskell and prepping for those big races up at the Spa. The not-so-good Exaggerator, he was keyed up throughout. He never seemed comfortable. He was wide throughout. Kent D tried to get him to relax a little bit. He had an opportunity at the top of the lane, but whether it was the trip here in the Belmont that didn't work, and it certainly didn't work, or it was a culmination of things. 3 big races in 5 weeks, 3 hard races, and he had been running for quite some time going back to the San Vicente and even the San Felipe, truly, at Santa Anita. I thought all things considered, this was not a good effort from Exaggerator. I still don't believe that he needs a wet track. I think he's better than that, and I think it's a horse that I think get a little bit of time with him. He's got to breathe a little bit. It sounds like he's going to be pointed toward those 2 races up at Saratoga, the Jim Dandy and the Travers. Don't give up an exaggerator just yet. But at the end of the day, I still think he's one that, you know what, this one was just not so good. And Governor Malibu, look, at the end of the day, disaster. And we'll talk about that here when we go over the race later on in the recap. But I was disappointed. Terrible trip. And sudden breaking news, he never got a call as the second choice in this race. That, to me, is a major concern. I understand he was a closer and it didn't work out for him, but at the end of the day, he's supposed to do some running. So big disappointment from sudden breaking news in the Belmont. Long segment, 20 minutes there. But we wanted to wrap everything up and put a little bow tie on the 2016 Triple Crown. We'll see these 3-year-olds here soon down the road at Saratoga and Monmouth and other places, various around the country. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back here on the Matt Bernier Show, we're going to dive into Tepin and talk about her victory in the Queen Anne earlier this week over at Royal Ascot and all the pomp and circumstance that happened as far as the Twitter is concerned with my little tweet. Stay with us here on the Matt Bernier Show.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
12:22 East Coast, 9:22 West Coast. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. If you're watching live on live.drf.com, thanks. If you're watching podcast version, listening to it, whether it's SoundCloud, YouTube, drf.com, ESPN.com, whatever it may be, thanks for giving us a little bit of time. Let's dive into Tepin a little bit. Earlier this week, she was victorious over at Royal Ascot in the Queen Anne. Let's first take a look at the stretch run before we dive into all the other nonsense.
These two dominate the finish of the Queen Anne. Tepin, Parado racing it out on the other line. Tepin puts that move, wins for America, advance the Queen.
On a straight course, over soft going, no nasal strip, no Lasix, Julian Leperoux aboard. It was all perfect for Tepin. She wins the Queen Anne. She represents the United States very well. A lot of people were concerned that maybe the style wasn't going to suit her, maybe the world-class competition, but at the end of the day, she beat some of those horses in the Breeders' Cup last year already, and she ran very well against these, clearly. There were a lot of things that she did very well there. I think this is arguably the best performance of her career, considering all the different sort of circumstances, the shipping overseas, no Lasix, no nasal strip, foreign setting, very, very talented horses. I went ahead and tweeted, and this shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone that watched DRF Live on Friday or Saturday last week when we went over our Belmont coverage. I said I thought that she right now was better than Wise Dan was at any point in his career. Now, that created a complete storm that I did not anticipate, and I didn't mean it to create a storm. People immediately thought that was a slight or a knock against Wise Dan. That's not what I intended on. That was not the plan. At the end of the day, Wise Dan's a Hall of Famer, a first ballot Hall of Famer, a horse that won 23 starts from 31 lifetime. Can we take a look at Wise Dan's PPs if we could? This was not meant to be a knock against Wise Dan by any stretch of the imagination. It was just a matter of my opinion, and again, you can't underline opinion enough. Doesn't mean that it's right. I think at her best, I think Tepin has done more against better competition than Wise Dan did during his career. Now, again, that's not saying the overall body of work. I get it. Everyone that wanted to come back and say she hasn't accomplished nearly as much, I get that. I'm well aware of that. He started 31 times and he won 23 of them. He rattled off 19 triple-digit Buyer speed figures over the course of his career. I get it. He's a Hall of Famer. I didn't mean to knock him. That wasn't meant as a knock. It's just my opinion that at her best, I think Teppen's best game is better than Wise Dan's best game was, even at his best. And that doesn't mean that he couldn't run with her. Teppen wouldn't embarrass him, in my opinion, but I just think that her best, particularly in this Queen Anne and particularly earlier, or last year, I should say, in the Breeders' Cup, I think those races were better than any races that Wise Dan ran. Now, again, if the Connections or anyone else was offended by that or was just disappointed in it, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't mean that as a negative. And I think that's the other thing, too. I love Twitter. Twitter is one of the best things ever created. It allows everyone to get their opinion out there, but it also allows people to overreact a little bit. Now, maybe you want to say me saying that Teppen is better than Wise Dan. You want to call that an overreaction? That's fine. I'm going to call it an overreaction that so many people went the other way and said, how could you be so disrespectful to Wise Dan and you don't know what you're talking about? I get it. If you don't agree with my opinion, that's fine. But just know that it was not meant as a knock or a slight against one horse compared to the other. And a lot of people wanted to bring up the idea that you don't need to use one to, you don't need to put down one to prop up another. Again, it's not, if anything, if I compared LeBron James to Magic Johnson, which again, that's the proper comparison, people, not LeBron to Michael Jordan. LeBron to Magic Johnson, that's not a knock against Magic Johnson. You follow me? And it's not a knock against LeBron. At the end of the day, they're two Hall of Famers. They're two first ballot Hall of Famers. You can make the case that they're two of the top 7 players all time. These two milers on turf are two of the best milers we've seen over the past 20 years. They're there. You've got Lure. You've got plenty of other good milers that were involved. And we had all sorts of people that went on. Mike Hogan at the era Formula, he tweeted out the 2 PPs, and you can go and find them if you want, for Teppen and for Wise Dan. And a lot of people went through and they started throwing out other names, whether it was Lure, whether it was Goldakova. And that was my other part of the argument, that if we can't compare horses from different eras, then what fun is it? No, you're right. We're never going to find out who's better. But isn't that part of the game? Isn't that part of sports in general? Trying to compare. We talk about it, got the U.S. Open on right now. Sergio with an approach. Tiger Woods compared to Jack Nicklaus. They never got to play each other when they were at their best. But that doesn't mean that you can't compare them and try to make a case of why you think Tiger at his best was better than Jack at his best, was better than Arnie at his best, was better than Seve at his best. It's just that's what we do in sports. And it's the best and worst thing about Twitter, that we can have all these arguments. Most of the time they're civil and cordial, and then you can have those other times on the flip side that it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth and makes you wonder, why did I even bring this up? I didn't think I was saying anything controversial, but it is what it is. And I think that was the other thing too. I felt like it took away a little bit from what Teppen accomplished. This was I think one of the all-time sort of performances from an American, maybe not overall as far as the race itself is concerned, but the fact that she went over there, she's basically breaking down doors. This is the first American horse to win the Queen Anne. We already know Wesley Ward. He's been the pioneer as far as sending horses over to Europe and particularly Royal Ascot and those sort of meetings and having them run well. But the fact now we have Mark Cassidy and Norm Cassidy, they did such a good job with her. They've turned Teppen into an absolute monster. Maybe this paves the way to send more horses. Graham Motion's been doing it. He sent Animal Kingdom over. He sent Miss Temple City over. She acquitted herself very well with a fourth place finish the other day. It's just one of those things where this is a positive thing. And just because I personally think that she's better than Wise Dan was at his best, that doesn't mean I think Wise Dan was a bum. Come on. That doesn't make any sense. Again, it's like any other part of sports. If we want to be considered a real mainstream sport, we've got to act like it. We can't go and throw tizzy fits whenever somebody makes a comparison. And a lot of people in the NBA are doing it currently, with whether it's Curry, whether it's LeBron, talking about going back, whether it's an Isaiah Thomas or comparison for Curry or any of these other people. It's just, that's part of what the fun of the whole being a sports fan is. So I didn't quite understand all the vitriol and chaos that ensued following that comment, that tweet, but at the end of the day, let's just appreciate both of them for what they did. Wise Dan, first ballot Hall of Famer. Teppen, at this rate, if she continues, first ballot Hall of Famer. And yes, my opinion is Tepin at her best was better than Wisedan ever was at his best. That's not a knock against the horse. It's not a knock against the connections. It's just my opinion, and guess what? That's part of the game. We have opinions, and we try to back them up, and we make arguments for them. So we just had to touch on Tepin a little bit here on the Matt Bernier Show and try to squash some of that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back from commercial, we'll take a look at some DRF Plus headlines. Just a brief little segment, but we've got some big tidbits in there. Again, the DRF Plus feed just below this video player. If you're watching on live.drf.com, you're going to want to get involved, get a subscription, and see all this good stuff. Stay with us here at Matt Bernier Show.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do.
12:31 East Coast, 9:31 now, 9:32 West Coast. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. Let's take a look at some DRF Plus headlines. We're a little bit heavy as far as time is concerned, so we're going to tighten this one up and keep it nice and short and prompt. Again, just below the video player, if you're on DRF Live, live.drf.com, you can get all the latest from our handicappers, writers, reporters with all sorts of DRF Plus subscriptions. Check it out, drf.com/plus to see what you're missing out on if you don't already have a subscription. Let's start off earlier this morning. Steve Anderson filed a report that Nyquist, he worked a half mile. This was his first half mile, his first major workout since the Preakness. We already made mention that he had gotten sick at one point, elevated white blood cell count, hopefully pointing toward Saratoga to get up there for the Travers and or the Jim Dandy. Worked a half mile in 48.3, galloped out 5/8 in a minute and 2. It'll be interesting to see again. Hopefully he comes out of this okay. I'm sure they'll do some blood work just to make sure, but hopefully this is the beginning of him getting back on the right track and heading up to Saratoga for a nice 3-year-old summer campaign against the big boys, the rest of the big boys anyway, in the 3-year-old crop. Let's go to Steve Anderson as well. Yesterday, Finnegan's Wake won a race at Santa Anita. The turf course, this is the final weekend of turf racing at Santa Anita for the final few weeks. They're in the process of tearing it up, putting down new turf, getting ready for the Breeders' Cup in November. Finnegan's Wake, he needed a bit of a confidence booster, according to trainer Peter Miller. Comes back, gets the job done yesterday, and it's going to be interesting to see. They've got a couple of targets possibly over the summer at Del Mar, one of them being the Eddie Reed. That's going to be on July 17th at 1 mile and an 1/8. That may be a bit sharp for him, or they could be looking at the Del Mar handicap on August the 20th. That's at 1 mile and 3/8. So either one or maybe even both of those races for Finnegan's Wake over the summer down at Del Mar. Jim Dunleavy filed a report yesterday about Unified, the winner for Jimmy Jerkins and Centennial Farms. This is a horse that was so impressive in the Peter Pan. He'll be making his next start on Sunday in the Grade 3 Pegasus at Monmouth Park. He'll be facing 6 other rivals. Among them, Donegal Moon. We saw him in the in the Bluegrass earlier this year at Keeneland. Abiding Star, we saw him in the Preakness. A bit of a troubled trip, got bounced around a little bit. A horse called Saratoga Jack, who threw up a triple-digit Buyer speed figure at Parks earlier this year. He'll be facing the majority of them. This is the local prep for the Haskell Stakes later on, I believe early August coming up this year. So Whether they stay there for this race and then they stay on for the Haskell, or they kind of reroute and head up to Saratoga. The question here is going to be if this horse, Unified, can deal with some other early heat, because there's plenty of early foot in this race, and he tends to be a forwardly placed runner. Can he deal with the other heat, put them away, and then go on with it? It'll be interesting to see. He's supremely talented. It'll be interesting to see if he can get through this spot on Sunday afternoon, excuse me. And Bradford, the last one we'll let you know about on DRF Plus. California's Chrome sister debuted yesterday, a full sister. Brad filed a report that she didn't offer any value, which is accurate. She was overly bet in this spot, and she'd been training well for Doug O'Neill, but at the end of the day, she was outrun early on. She made up a good move down the lane. She galloped out, full of energy. Again, if she's a full sister to California Chrome, the pedigree isn't spectacular, but she looks a little bit like her brother. I'm not comparing her talent-wise, but as far as distance, maybe she's going to want to go a little bit further. I believe she debuted yesterday at 5, certainly too sharp. Stretch her out next time, I think. Maybe not 2 turns, but at least 6, 7 furlongs. We'll see how she comes out of that race, or scam out of that one yesterday, going forward to her second lifetime start. So again, DRF Plus headlines. If you don't already have a subscription, take a look, drf.com/plus. That's the news feed just below here. And you can also get all sorts of other good news stories and handicapping sort of pieces that we put together every week on the homepage at drf.com. So you're going to take a look at that. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back in the Matt Bernier Show here, 12:35 on the East Coast, we'll dive into last weekend's races, the handicapping review of the Woody Stevens, the Met Mile, and the Belmont Stakes. Stay with us.
Here's Macho Uno.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home, and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do.
12:37 on the East, 9:37 on the West, the Matt Bernier Show on DRF Live. Let's dive into the handicapping review of last week. If you're new to the show, the way this works, every week we go over 3 or 4 races that are on the upcoming weekend, and the following week we'll go back and kind of report back, for better or for worse, how things worked out. And again, this is a new thing that we've kind of implemented, and you'll see it when we do the preview segment. My odds are attached to all the horses and giving you what I think they ultimately should go off at or could offer value at. So last weekend, we're going to go over 3 races. The first one was the Woody Stevens. It was for the 3-year-olds going 7 furlongs on the main track. I thought the most likely winner in the race was the 1 Sharp as Tekka. He was coming out of that huge score down at Churchill Downs on Derby Day and the Pat Day Mile. Pressed the pace throughout, pressed hot fractions, went on with it, looked like a good thing. I thought he was the most likely winner, but he had a really tough draw from the inside. I thought a live long shot was a horse called Tom's Ready, goes out for Dallas Stewart. He's turning back from the Kentucky Derby, and he just kind of gave off the vibe that ultimately he was going to be one of those horses that wanted to go one turn, whether it was at a mile, whether it was at 7 furlongs. Stewart's done well with these turnbacks in the past. He was what I considered a live long shot, and he was my pick in the race. Unfortunately, we don't have the video for you for this one, but at the end of the day, Tom's Ready. They had a crazy, crazy pace going on early on. Sharp as Tekka was able to get out a little bit from the inside, and he was able to get into a decent enough position, but he was close to hot fractions. Tom's Ready was completely outrun, about 150 lengths out of it. As they turned for home, Tom's Reddy's making this big move on the far outside. Sharp As Tech is getting a little bit tired. He ends up finishing 4th, I believe, but Tom's Reddy ultimately came through, weaved through traffic, got the job done at 7-1. He was short for my liking. I liked him at 13-1. He went off at 7. So although the pick was right, I didn't like the odds. I didn't make a play, and that's the beauty of the value line. You don't make a play when you don't think you're getting rewarded or you don't think you're getting fair value. I didn't think 7-1 was fair value on this horse. I wanted a little bit more. I tried to get alive to him in doubles and pick 3s. Certain things on Saturday worked out for me, certain things didn't. Tom's Reddy, I thought he ran very well. It sounds like they're going to put him away for a little while, and they're going to target the King's Bishop up at Saratoga. I think that's the perfect plan. You want to go up there with a fresh horse going 7/8 of a mile. I think he's an interesting runner. He's run decently enough at Saratoga. He ran in one of the graded stakes races last year up at the Spas, a 2-year-old. So live long shot, Tom's Reddy. He wins the race, and the Woody Stevens, most likely winner, the 1 Sharp As Tech, runs well enough for a beaten 4th, but considering he was close to that pace, I think that proved that this horse is no fluke. I think he can run a little bit. Let's move to the Met Mile. This was a fascinating race going into it because you had so many different ways that you could go. I thought the most likely winner in the race was the number 5 horse called Frosted. I also thought he was a bit of a vulnerable favorite, and he figured to go off at a short price in a race that I thought was just super contentious top to bottom. I thought a live favorite, or a live long shot rather, was a horse called Donworth for Doug O'Neill. Unfortunately, he was a scratch the morning of. He got a bit of a cough. We may be able to see Donworth here in a few weeks, next weekend actually, in either the Triple Bend or the Santa Anita Gold Cup down there at the Great Race Place. So I thought Frosted was a likely winner going into it, but I didn't live him at the price. But I didn't know he was going to do what he did here.
To the top of the stretch. It is Anchor Down, joined on the outside by Frosted. And Frosted has gone on by and he has exploded. He is absolutely blowing his competition away. Oh my goodness, look at Frosted today. Frosted's 10 in front. Frosted is absolutely rubbed in the Met Mile. He was wrapped up.
Larry Colmes with a great call of the Met Mile. Frosted never really asked to run. Dusted a good field, not a great field, a good field of horses in the Grade 1 Met Mile. You're not supposed to win races like that. And after the day was over, we're talking a little bit, myself, Dan Illman, Mike Beer, and we're going, boy, this is going to be a giant number, because if you figure Anchor Down, who ran second, he was getting tired at the end. You saw him wobbling around a little bit. If you figure he ran something close to his race, whether it's a high 90 or a low 100, I mean, did Frosted get a 115? This is going to be a giant number. And then the number comes out the next day of a 123. In my time in racing, 120 is unheard of. I know American Pharoah got the 120 in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, but that's a number that can be poked, kind of, I don't know if that's actually a 120. This thing with a 123, that was a major league effort. I would make the case that's the best race of the year, and it will be the best race of the year. I don't think anyone's going to run a better race than Frosted ran the Met Mile. And as far as I'm concerned, in the years that I've been paying attention, that was the most impressive performance I've ever seen from a racehorse, which is a little bit stunning because where was that race in Dubai? I wonder if it was just the second start over there without the Lasix, and he ran so well in that prep in the Round 2 Al Maktoum Challenge, but boy, he'd never done anything like this. This was an eye-opening performance. Frosted with a 123 buyer. He prevails as the most likely winner, and I also thought a vulnerable favorite, making me look like a dummy because there was no vulnerability there. It was a major league effort. It sounds like they're going to give him plenty of time. Looks like it'll be the Whitney, a prep, whether it is the Jockey Club or some other race, and then the Breeders' Cup Classic. We may only see him 3 more times, but boy, Frosted with performance, really, you could make the case over the past 10, 15, 20 years, one of the better performances we've seen from a horse for Kieran McLaughlin. So the number 5 Frosted at 123 as far as the buyer is concerned wins the Met Mile. The Belmont Stakes, I thought the most likely winner was the 11 horse Exaggerator. He was your Preakness winner coming into this. He had a tough outside post. I didn't know if he was going to love a mile and a half. A lot of people still didn't believe that he could really run on a dry track. They thought he needed to have the wet track to run his best. I disagreed. I still disagree. I thought a live long shot, and my pick in the race was Governor Malibu. I thought Governor Malibu should have been 6-1. He ultimately went off at 17-1, so I lined up. I sent it in, and I'm feeling good as we're watching the trip. And then as we take it from the top of the lane, didn't work out.
Stretch, and Destin has taken the lead in the Belmont Stakes. Stradivari is there. Governor Malibu couldn't get through on the inside. He is in traffic. Exaggerator. Here comes Lonnie on the far outside, and Creator is coming too. It is Destin in front. Creator, Lonnie on the outside, Destin and Creator, these two come down to the line together, too close to goal. It was.
Let's just get Exaggerator out of the way. He was flat down the lane. He had a wide trip. He was keen early on. It's been a long campaign, 3 big races, 5 weeks, 3 different states. Not gonna hold this race against him. He just got tired late. Governor Malibu, look, it was a perfect trip until it wasn't. And that was sort of the MO for Joel Rosario on Saturday. He had a huge day. I believe he had 5 victories. The same thing happened with Forever Unbridled, who I also happen to have quite a bit tied up into, where it was the perfect trip until it wasn't. He couldn't find any sort of a seam. He tried there on Governor Malibu. I'd like to think if you reverse some of these trips or if you give him the Creator trip, I think Governor Malibu at least threatens for the win. He may not get there, but he at least threatens for it. A disappointing end result for me to the Triple Crown, but at the end of the day, good racing, entertaining races, a fantastic finish in the Belmont between Creator and Destin. But as far as the handicapping is concerned, all things considered, thought it was a pretty good weekend. With Tom's Ready, we picked him on top. Governor Malibu, an unlucky sort of 4th place finish in that spot, and Frosted running off the charts in the Met Mile. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll take a look at this coming weekend's races. We've got 3 of them lined up for you. They'll all be here on DRF Live starting tomorrow at 4 o'clock Eastern. Stay with us.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. For starters, DRF Bets is the only place you can get free DRF PPs when you wager. But we don't stop at PPs. With free access to DRF Plus, DRF Bets members get the kind of insider information you can't get from a PP. Like behind-the-scenes news coverage and live trackside reporting about changing conditions, biases, workouts, and more, right from the horse's mouth. Plus, free DRF selections, closer looks, and a full range of premium reports, like our popular daily game plan. And since 70% of betting is on exotics, DRF Bets provides special support for players, including weekly bonuses, and our exclusive Ticket Maker wagering app that helps you win more on exotic wagers. We've also made rewards simple. The DRF Bets Rewards program gives you back more of what you wager, period. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more, whether you're home or on the go. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do. Does your wagering platform do all of that?
Here's Machono.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
12:47 East Coast, 9:47 West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. Let's dive into it again. We're getting tight on time. Handicapping preview, 3 races. We'll have all 3 of them covered for you here on DRF Live tomorrow afternoon, starting at 4 o'clock East Coast. Myself, Dan Ullman, Mike Beer will bring you through the races starting at Belmont Park, and we'll wrap things up at Churchill Downs tomorrow night with their sort of under the lights card, if you will. They've got a couple of graded stakes events going on. Let's start off, though, at Santa Anita. Chronological order. The Rainbow Stakes, fantastic field. You've got 11 signed on in here, and again, we're going to throw up this slate, the over to the right side. That's not the morning line. Those are the odds that I think would be fair for these horses. Tomorrow, going 1 1/8 on the turf. It's for 3-year-olds at Santa. Again, on the final weekend of turf racing at Santa Anita, as far as this meeting is concerned. I think it's a very interesting race. You can go a number of different ways in this spot. You've got horses that have just broken their maiden, and essentially, talked to Brad Free earlier this week that this is basically an allowance race. We're not talking about superstars in this spot. I think a vulnerable favorite is the number 6 Arcature. This is a horse, and we're going to take a look at his most recent start. This was his 3rd race at Santa Anita on May the 14th. He looks like he's home free in this spot, that he's just going to go on and put the boots to this field, and he hits the front, and I think he pulls himself up a little bit, because you're going to see Tristan's Trilogy in the Teal Silks really make a strong move at him. And at 3 to 5, anybody that backed this horse, Arcature, you're going to get a little bit concerned. The most interesting thing about him is, though, just when it looked like he was going to get run down late, he galloped out full of energy and really dusted Tristan's Trilogy. So I almost feel like he pulled himself up when he hit the front. I think a live long shot in this race is the number 2, Prince of Arabia. He's a huge number on the morning line. I think he's 15 or 20. I made him 13-1. I think I'm going to get every bit of that. He's tried turf one time for Jim Cassidy. It's listed as good going. It was much heavier, much boggier than good going. I think he ran pretty well, all things considered. He ran into Arcature in that spot. He ran into Beach Patrol. We know what Beach Patrol turned into. I think Prince of Arabia, in a field where there are no superstars, I think Prince of Arabia's got a shot at a big number. I have him as my live long shot at odds 13-1. Let's flip over to the Matt Winn. This is going to be one of 2 races from Churchill Downs that we talk about here. The Matt Winn, it's a short field, only 7 horses in here. As we take a look, Gun Runner is going to be a heavy favorite. It's 3-5 in the morning line. I made him 4-5. In many ways, I wouldn't fault anyone that wanted to single him or key anything in on him on top, because he's going to be super tough to deal with. Any of his past 4 or 5 races really is going to be good enough to beat a field like this. He's very clearly the most likely winner, and let's take a look. This is his run in the Kentucky Derby. He ran very well, and you're going to see him. He's down on the inside in the white hat and those sort of maroon silks. Nyquist is just going by him right now. But if you look, the only other horse that's really coming at him is Exaggerator. Other than that, he stays on. He gets a little bit tired at the end, but I can give him the benefit of the doubt. He's run hard. He's been close to that pace throughout. I thought this is a good effort from Gun Runner, considering I didn't love him down in Louisiana, and again, he did shut me up. I thought he ran very well. I know he's back in his left lead. You're going to turn him back here to a 1 1/8, or 1 16th rather. This is a very good spot for this horse. He's 4-5 on my line. He's 3-5 in the morning line. He may be even short of that come post time. So not advocating that he's going to be a true win candidate. If you're looking for a live long shot, how about the number 6 Texas Chrome? This is a horse that's untested against quality competition. He just dusted a field in his most recent start. That was against Texas breds, or restricted horses, I should say. It was his first time going 2 turns. He looked very good doing so. He didn't beat much. He's going to be facing a world of different caliber animal in this spot Saturday night. I think he's got an outside chance. I made him 6-1. You can use him underneath and fool around. I don't think he's a likely upsetter, but I think he's a live long shot you can try and get some value out of. Let's go to the Fleur de Lis, another short field. Only 6 are going to go in this spot. Untappable is going to be a heavy favorite in here. You can't trust her form recently. Her recent form is a disaster. Not from a fig standpoint. She's still running good races, but she's not winning them. That's the biggest problem for me. She's not putting them away. She's going to be forwardly placed. I made her 5-2. She's going to be much shorter than that. Hot Chocolate is a likely upsetter if you want to look at some other horse. I made her 3-1. I don't trust her a ton all at the same time. I think the most likely winner is Untappable. I also think she's a vulnerable favorite simply based on the way she's run here in 2016 and even go back to 2015. She just doesn't seem to like to get the job done anymore. If you're looking for a live long shot, and this is one that I'm hopeful, I need Julien Leparoux to get Brooklyn's way into the running a little bit earlier. Her best race thus far, and we can take a look at it. This is from Keeneland on April the 22nd. She was close. This is her. She's on the lead right now. And Hot Chocolate is chasing her. Brooklyn's Way has been forwardly placed throughout the entire race. And I think this running style in a race like the Fleur de Lis, where there's not a ton of early speed signed on, you're going to have Untappable up there, but we've made it clear she's not the most trustworthy animal at this stage in the game. If Leparoux gets Brooklyn's Way into the running a little bit earlier, I think she's got an interesting sort of outside chance in a race. I don't want to have a ton of money against Untappable, but at the same time, I made this horse 6-1 Brooklyn's Way. If I could get something even a little bit higher than that, again, you got to be a little bit flexible when you make your line. I want a little bit higher. I want to be greedy. I would throw $10 at her and say, hey, I think she's got a shot of upsetting. And even if not, I think she can add some value to your exotics, whether you want to play an exact or a trifecta in a race where maybe Untappable is a little bit vulnerable. So let's just give you a quick recap. The Rainbow, I think the vulnerable favorite is the 6 Arcature. I think a live long shot is the 2 Prince of Arabia. The Matt Winn, most likely winner is the 2 Gun Runner. Live long shot is the 6 Texas Chrome. And the Fleur de Lis, the most likely winner and vulnerable favorite is Untappable. And a live long shot is the 6 Brooklyn's Way. We've crammed a lot into a short amount of time. We're going to take a break here on the Matt Bernier Show as we turn for home. When we come back, weekend preview, video of the week, DRF Formulator, race of the day for Friday. Stay with us.
Here's Machono!
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do.
12:55 on the East, 9:55 on the West. The Matt Bernier Show on DRF Live. We're going to wrap things up here. Let's take a look at the weekend slate if we could. This is going to be on DRF Live tomorrow starting at 4 o'clock Eastern. We're going to bring you through most of the back half of Belmont. We'll bring you through quite a few races at Santa Anita, as well as a couple from Churchill Downs. We're going to throw up at the end of the slate, knowing that there's still 2 more graded stakes races at Churchill. By the time we sign off, we'll throw up the previews as we sign off, give you some sort of an update of what's going on. The other thing, too, to keep in mind that I haven't even made mention of today is that in the Summertime Oaks, we're going to have the return of undefeated 2-year-old champion Songbird. She had a little bit of a sickness. She had an illness. She missed the Kentucky Oaks. She makes her return to the races here in the Summertime Oaks in a very interesting spot for Hollendorfer. You've got a couple of D'Amato fillies in here who look very good on paper, so it'll be interesting to see if she can come back. But that's the schedule tomorrow, 4 o'clock Eastern, here on DRF Live. Myself, Dan Illman, Mike Beard will bring you through all the best racing action. As we do every week on the show, this is the video of the week. It happened last night in the NBA Finals. LeBron is really putting the team on his back, bringing the Cavs back. Now we're 3-3. We're going to go back to Golden State Sunday night for Game 7. And first and foremost, Steph Curry's wife probably shouldn't be tweeting that she thinks that the NBA has rigged the series, that they just want to get more money and they want to get more TV ratings. It's not a good look. Not a good look, particularly from the MVP's wife, and knowing that they won the title last year and they won 73 games this year. But Steph was clearly frustrated with the way that the refereeing was going on and the officiating as a whole, and he went and did this.
We'll get that deflected rebound. And a foul on Curry, and Curry's going to get it with a technical. He throws his mouthpiece.
Now, if we can see it one more time, and I'm going to talk over it, you can hear Mike Breen in the back, but I want to know why, of all people, that guy? Why this guy? Because of the finger wag? Because of the finger wag, he deserved to get smoked in the head with a mouth guard? That seems a little bit immature to me, Steph. Come on, you're better than that. Especially, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing shakes down, where you're seeing more and more that Steph is not the, look, he may look like a 12-year-old, but he's not the sort of, on the court, he can be a bit of a jerk. He can be a bit of a chirper, and look, it's good. You can chirp when you can back it up, but when things don't go your way, you can't throw your mouth guard at some random fan. It's not a good look. And apparently this isn't the first time he did it this year either. I saw that last night as well, that he got a technical because he threw a mouth guard at a referee earlier in the year as well. So Steph's got to get his act together and quickly, because they're going home, and if LeBron keeps playing like this, they've got a chance. I understand Vegas, I think the line opened last night at 4.5 toward Golden State. It quickly moved to 5. It'll be interesting to see. I wouldn't put anything past LeBron James. I think he's still the best player in the league. I understand he's getting older. I think LeBron is still the guy. Steph, phenomenal shooter, phenomenal player, deserves the MVP. But if I need one player for one game, I'm taking LeBron. I've never understood why all of my friends in New England and Massachusetts particularly have just such hate for LeBron. Why? Because he's good? And if he was on the Celtics, we would all be drooling over him? Stop. Long story short, that's your video of the week. As we wrap up here, 12:58 on the show, we're going to throw it to the formulated race of the day. It's the first at Belmont, and this is going to sound weird. The first at Belmont, still not going to go off for 2 more hours. Twilight card here at Belmont Park. If you're in New York, get out there. The weather's fantastic. 3:05 is the first post. Let's throw it to Illman and Beer. Formulated race of the day. We'll see you next Friday. I may not see you live. We're going to have to figure it out. I'll be out at Santa Anita. We may be having some sort of a joint combo, but we'll get you queued up as far as what's going on.